Hi, welcome to the Semiotic Eye, a podcast where you get to learn about all things semiotics. The following episodes will include conversations between Hamsini Shivkumar, India's leading semiotician and founder of Leapfrog Strategy Consulting, and Anurag Wesh, the founder of Mensa, a social media platform for audio sharing. The live audience listening to the conversations were allowed to interject and ask questions. Unfortunately, you won't be able to do the same here. However, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us on Leapfrog Strategy Consulting on LinkedIn. We hope this podcast is insightful to you and deepens your understanding of semiotics.
So without further ado, I shall just jump into the topic, which is color semiotics. And I thought because it's something that people automatically associate with semiotics, and especially in marketing, when people think semiotics, they tend to think color. So I thought, let me talk about the subject and also dispel some misunderstandings or misconceptions that people have about color semiotics. So, but before we go into the semiotics of color, I just want to sort of, for the sake of being comprehensive, say that color as a phenomena can be studied in different ways. So the scientific study of color is actually based on the physics of color, right, as connected to the biology of human vision. So, to answer questions like how many shades of color can the human eye detect? Hence, and how many actual shades of color are there in the universe, and can it be measured, and can it be put into some kind of scale and numbering and all that. So there is all of that in available for people who study color, and as a reference. Then the other approach to the study of color scientifically, so to speak, is the psychology of color, where people have tried to identify whether there is a connection or correlation, or I don't know whether there'll be causation, but at least correlation between colors and moods and feelings. And there is some work there, and it has sort of indicates, so you have all this labeling of colors as cool colors and warm colors, and it has these sort of impact, and that tends to be used in interior design. And if you go and put color and something on the internet, you will get tons of color wheels, which are supposedly based on color psychology. A lot of it, I classify all of that as pseudoscience, but it's a fun thing to look at. But coming to the semiotics of color, it actually takes an approach based on the intersection of language, cognition, and culture. So that is the way color is read from a semiotic point of view. So let's look at some examples from marketing, right? So if we saw, for instance, you saw a bright pink painted motorcycle which is parked in an office parking lot, what sort of ideas would come to your mind if you saw that pink colored motorcycle? How would you interpret that color on a motorcycle? Your thoughts, Sharjil,
I guess
Divya?
there would be, I guess there would be some dissonance initially. It would take like some getting used to, Hamsini, but I guess, that would be my initial knee-jerk response, I guess. And then
Okay, so where is the dissonance coming from?
Because of the stereotypes of a motorcycle and pink, right? I think that would be where it would come from. But before, that would be the knee-jerk response, and then you'd go like, oh, that's...
Okay, so it basically, sorry, yes, Sharjil.
So for me, it'll definitely be like a little bit of it is rooted in gaming, because some gaming characters have like pink motorcycles. So I'll be like, oh, here we are. I have seen this before. So it's a very different take on it.
Yes, so therefore there can be dissonance because it's not what you are used to seeing. So pink is used to represent the feminine, whereas your association of motorcycles is that it's an ultra masculine vehicle. So the two coming together makes you wonder, okay, what's going on here and who might the rider be, right? Am I expecting to see a guy, or am I expecting to see a woman motorcyclist? Both of which would be rare. And if you saw a very typical machismo, muscular clad guy in leather and boots and, all of that riding gear, and then he came and sat on that pink motorcycle and rode away, you'd certainly have many question marks in your mind because of the high degree of dissonance, right? Whereas if, for example, Vespa scooters are available in a wide range of interesting colors and shades, right? In fact, they are known for it: bright yellow, pale blue, light pink, etc. And if we saw Vespa scooters with these colors, we might be more, rather there might be less dissonance, because scooters are not considered to be ultra masculine vehicles as, let's say, heavy motorcycles are. So somehow what we are finding is that colors are being connected with gender, right? For gender signaling. Is it masculine? Is it feminine? Gender neutral, etc. And it's partly a result of continuous marketing and consumer culture. And now, of course, we have that rainbow colors as a thing for gay pride and Pride Month and all of that. That multicolored sign is used to signal gender neutrality or gender respect. Call it what you will. And of course, we have had this baby care brands using color coding by gender, blue for boys and pink for girls, for a very long time. Though I see now among my peer group that many parents are rebelling against this forced gender identity being given to color. Actually, children themselves don't necessarily form these connections, and their color preferences are perhaps more individual and vary over time. And we may find, another example, let's say you're launching a new drink based on lemon flavor. Then what shade of yellow and what type of treatment would you use for that yellow color? So you could use, a choice could range from a very natural looking yellow to a much more psychedelic yellow. And each of those shades and sort of treatment of the color can also connote certain things, certain ideas and certain meanings and interpretations, and lead to different kinds of consumer responses. So it's these kind of internal debates and questions that come up which make people think, maybe I need to have a better understanding of color semiotics. So let's step back and look at color semiotics from a more theoretical perspective. The first and interesting point is that if you look at color simply as in terms of our human apparatus for identifying color, first seeing and then identifying, or perceiving and identifying, and if we compare it with speech. For speech, actually, we have ears which can hear the sound and then convert it into meaningful concepts and ideas and all that. And then we have our ears and we have our mouth, so we can speak in response and we can hear, and so the loop is complete in a certain sense. Whereas when it comes to color, and we think about color from, what is the basic requirement, biological requirement for color and color recognition, then we see that we see the color through our eyes, but we don't have, like, the way we create color, or we speak and listen, like that we don't have that interconnected mechanisms biologically. We see color at a certain point, and then at another point we reproduce the color or variations or changes, etc., depending upon what tools we use to draw the color or paint the color or graphically create or reproduce the color. Now, this is just some overall thought to keep in mind. But if we think about color as a semiotic phenomena and similar to language, then we find one feature of color, which is different from other types of language, which is that color is both visual and verbal. By which I mean, we can recognize the color visually, but it's interpretable only when it is named. That is, it becomes a combined visual and verbal unit. Like, if you think about lots of colors that are used in background, or many shades of color which are there, if you go into a shade card, a Pantone card, for example, might show 25,000 colors, but we don't recognize every shade and have a name for it. So therefore it does not really function as an interpretable unit for us. So interpretable units of color have to marry a verbal unit with the visual unit. You need to be able to name the color first and then connect it further with, anything else that we want. And here again, the thing is, if you compare with natural languages have almost 200,000 units or 2 lakhs plus kind of vocabulary is there in natural language. And then, of course, if you add all the other types of jargon or technical language which has been constructed, then the vocabulary can increase even further. But on the other hand, with color, we only have like 80 to 100 color terms by way of words, and maybe 30 shades of primary colors that are significant. And the implication of that is that there is a lot of ambiguity or multiple meanings that colors can take. So that means that color interpretation is not so obvious, and it's actually a function of 3 things. It is a function of context, it's a function of in-marketing category and culture, and that's why it is ambiguous. Then there are some other aspects of this color and color naming. One is that color names, there are some basic colors that everybody knows, and almost all languages will have words for those colors like red, blue, green, yellow, some of those colors, but they may not have words for certain shades. And on the other hand, the language may have some shades which is not recognized in, let's say, English. So for instance, and they are often named after the objects themselves that we are familiar with, which carries the color. So, for example, I am a Tamilian, and there is a flower much used in South India called Kanakambaram, and that is a certain shade of orange, and it is referred to as Kanakambaram. That particular shade is referred to by the name of the flower that embodies that color. The second point is that the same color can have opposed meanings. So, for example, black can signify glamour, but black is also a color of cover-up. So if you wear a black burqa or if you wear a black hijab, then you are not connoting glamour. Whereas if you wear that little black dress, then that connotes glamour. Or, when the guy wears the suit or the tuxedo, then you think of him in a particular way, whereas black is also... So black can have many meanings depending upon which object from which you are actually looking at the color black. And because of that, the same color can have opposed meanings as well. So it can be glamour, it can be evil, it can be cover-up, it can be opposite of glamour, which is totally unglamorous. Then the other thing is the same concept can be expressed via different colors. So for instance, if I want to connote natural, I can use brown, I can use green, I can use aqua, I can use different colors to connote the same meaning or the same concept of naturalness. So therefore, color interpretation actually needs to take into account all of these things. Like I said, it has to take into account context, where it is used, or which can be, in the case of marketing, where is it used? Is it the color of the pack? Is it the color of the product? Is it the color used in the comms? It is the color of the brand identity. So you have to see where is it being used to actually get the accurate interpretation. Then, of course, categories have their own codification of color, right? So in certain categories, yellow and certain types or shades of yellow are regularly used. Like if I'm doing lemon for a drink, a lemon for a dishwash, and I'm doing lemon for face cream. Is the shade of yellow exactly the same as the treatment of the lemon itself? The color that is used on the lemon itself, is it the same? Is it different? Does it need to be different? So the different categories have their own codification of certain treatments of color that everybody is used to and familiar with. So therefore, there is a category aspect. And then, of course, there's a cultural aspect as well, which I'll come to shortly. So therefore, there are actually 3 ways in which color is used to address audiences. One is what I'm calling color as a precognitive unit. So what do I mean by this? It means that we recognize colors and shades and we can match the names overall, but we are not expected to do anything more. So this type of a usage of color actually accounts for a very large extent of color usage in modern consumer culture, right? Like background colors, colored patterns, things that you see. You have a recognition that, oh, this is pink or this is a shade of gray or something. but you don't go further than that in your interpretation. So it's a kind of precognitive unit where you're not applying real serious cognition to interpret or read the color as a sign. So in a Persian sense, we are not yet reading colors as signs, and colors here function just like pictograms do. Like when we use pictograms all the time in emoji and all of that, we recognize that smiley as because it has a visual similarity to a human smile, and that's all we need to recognize. So you can match and then you can use it. So that's how color also functions in this sort of rudimentary sense, if you will, from an interpretive standpoint. Then you have color as a cognitive unit. So here we are provided colors to recognize, match, and identify, but it is used to identify sensorials or details. So for example, in a painting or a photograph, but we are able to interpret more of it, and we do it also because of aesthetic pleasure or some other action you need to take. So, for instance, if you take in marketing, the packs of face masks that claim to have natural ingredients, they will often have rich photoreal images of the fruits or flowers with droplets of water, etc. So, the color is actually being used to evoke sensations which we would otherwise require other senses. Let us say touch, for example. And you're achieving that sensory effect by actually the use of color, shades of color, detail and depth, etc., etc. Or as I was saying, for instance, in that new lemon drink, people may actually interpret that psychedelic yellow. So if you see a more natural shade of yellow, you would think that, oh, this is a natural drink and it's really like a fresh lemon drink. Whereas if it was a kind of psychedelic yellow, you would indicate to you it's a more synthetic or chemical drink. And so this interpretation can be both cognitive and cultural. So for example, in our culture, consumers are much more sensitive to this natural chemical binary due to its connection with health and harm, which is compared to other cultures which haven't learned this binary. Like whenever I go to American supermarkets and I look at food packaging on American supermarkets, I am very shocked by the type of colors that they use on food packaging, and they have psychedelic colors and all kinds of things. And it doesn't go down well with me because of my Indian cultural conditioning into foods. Food packs should be like this and they should not be like this, because when I see those, it seems to me, oh my God, they're so unhealthy. And don't the Americans realize that? But then I realize that this is, so that's why I said it's part cognition and part culture. So which brings me to color as a cultural unit or ideogram. So here colors are being used symbolically, drawing from culture, which means there's often some kind of storyline attached, towards the significance of the color in culture, right? And that is where actually a lot of interesting findings come in terms of, wedding. Well, a lot of it is to do with the life processes, right? Colors associated with life, with death, with marriage, with, bridegroom, cultural relationships, etc. And the colors that are used to connote or indicate those things. Or for example, we have in India, like the traditional colors used in Hindu rituals are the red because of kumkum, and yellow from haldi, and green leaves, and white. And most wedding decor that I have seen, even the background and all of that tends to use only these colors. You have to be really wealthy and, a bit to kind of deviate from this by getting all exotic orchids and flowers of all other cultures and putting them on your mandap. Otherwise, most people would put these traditional ritual colors only on their mandap. So in modern marketing and consumer culture, color as a cultural unit is used to connote or signify gender, as we saw in the beginning. It can be used to connote life stage, like is it a children's product or an adult product, etc. And then, of course, based on whatever that product is or the brand concept, etc., etc. And marketers, I have seen, do try to disrupt the category by using color as both a cognitive and cultural unit. because they try to change the color codes of the category from their brand vis-a-vis established category norms or codes. So Cred did a white on black background on their app and made the background black versus, typically it's black letters on white background. Or some new brand of whiskey or vodka might try to bring a whole new color entirely, which is not typical in the category, to kind of indicate that they are different or distinctive. So in movies and theater, of course, directors can use color as a symbolic cultural unit to underline and drive home their message. So for instance, in the movie Kala, Pa Ranjit, the director, has a very interesting play on black and white, right? Typically black is evil and white is good. But he inverts it and makes the villain Nana Patekar wear white, and he's in a white home and he's all supposed to be all pure, but he's evil inside. Whereas Rajinikanth is always dressed in black. His name itself is Kala, which says that he is black. So you can also do that kind of color play, and there are many, many such examples that you would find especially in cinema as symbolic communication. So as I said, in summary, I would say that the use of color can be made in very many different ways, and you need to be sensitive to that when you are designing to use color. We have only 40 seconds left, so any thoughts, comments, questions, and then I can address it maybe in the next conversation.
Go, Shraddha.
It's like color, which color do you choose, right? That's going on in my head at the moment. And I think, first off, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, because it makes sense to me to look at colors through these lenses as well. And color is beautiful, guys.
Thank you for listening to The Semiotic Eye. Please stay tuned for more episodes of this podcast. And if you want to learn more about semiotics, please go to our website, leapfrogstrategy.com, and access our learning center to start your semiotic journey. Bye.